we were out surfing the other day, and I got in the water, and this is a gardening video, don't worry, but just hear me out. And I get in the water and I look, I'm like, man, these seem like tropical depression waves. I told my wife, and next thing you know, tropical depression that afternoon. So that being said, and I'm looking here, and all of this is some kind of tropical disturbance that's kind of brewing off of our coast. So I'm in coastal North Carolina, commonly referred to as Hurricane Alley. But it got me thinking, if everything went bad, and it's possible that it can, I mean, we've had full-blown hurricanes take out our entire garden, what would I plant to come back really fast in the fall? So we have to remember we're coming into the fall season, so everything in this video is centered around that. I do have a couple bales of straw that I'm gonna put on these beds today to just help protect them in case we do get a storm. You know, we're always, come this time of year, this is the official peak of hurricane season. I like to just constantly be doing something just in case. You know, these beds aren't really gonna be doing anything, so we're gonna go ahead and mulch them and just protect them from any kind of heavy rains or anything that could possibly be heading our way. The reason why I wanted to focus on this particularly is because, one, it is it's peak season, and then after that, so typically we always get a hurricane, not always, but if we do, it's in between, you know, the middle of August into the middle of September, which is like prime growing real estate. I mean, you know, if you get something bad that happens, and I've said this in many videos over and over again, but I know there's a lot of new people. In Hurricane Florence, we had a tree back here that fell all the way down and crushed all of our gardens, okay? So we didn't have as many gardens at the time. We only had 4 beds at the time, but when that tree came down, it took everything out with it, and we had to bounce back. And you know, the mantra that I have for my garden is we want to grow food in case what? In case there is no food. And in fact, in that hurricane, there was no access to food for about a week. So, you know, that was a good dry run for like, what have we got going on? Is everything good? And everything worked out great. It was awesome. So that was a good dry run, and we could have gone much, much, much longer than a week, but you never know. So when I did that, I did come back out and I replanted, and I had made some mistakes. This was, heck, I guess it was 6 years ago now. Yeah, 6 years ago. So, you know, there's a lot that have changed in those last 6 years, and knowing what to plant and when you can plant it is going to make all the difference in the world for this, because the goal with these few vegetables, and notice I said few, is to be able to, in the month, let's just say September 10th, we get a hurricane. So from then all the way until our first frost, which is November 11th, how much can we grow and how prepared can we be for growing into the frost season, which we always do here. Mentioned, this was an honorable mention in another video, but the radish, the almighty radish, absolutely a good one. No issues there. Looking roughly 21 days, roughly, and you can get a harvest from a radish. So that's obviously a good one. Now, the caveat here is you're probably going to have to direct sow, because if we put on our imagination here and we start thinking, this is going to be a situation in which you're probably not going to get a whole lot more time to start any kind of seed or anything like that. So, you know, this is going to be a very direct, sowable, heavy group of seedlings. So my number one, and I'm going to get this out of the way right now, which I know we're like way into the video. My number one is going to be bok choy. Bok choy is a great, quick, and easy crop to grow. I never expected it to be my favorite, but it is absolutely my favorite. It's so easy to grow. You can harvest it young, you can harvest it old. It's very frost hardy. It's just all around a great crop to have in your garden, and especially in a situation like that, you could go ahead and direct sow it in, you know, early September, and you can be just getting on par with it, getting a nice harvest off of it. You're going to have to end up putting a low tunnel over it at some point, more than likely, but that's just to extend your harvest because you're gonna have to plant a lot, right? Because your garden's gone. One I would think about would be potatoes. You know, if you can get a fall crop of potatoes in, that should be around the right time. You know, on this channel, I definitely am in coastal North Carolina, so I focus on that, but I always keep in mind across the country, other people and what they do. And you know, again, you can take hurricane out of the mix and mix in whatever you want. For some reason, a hailstorm comes. Usually it's a natural disaster event. You can get your potatoes in the ground, get them covered if you have to, and you know, early September, depending on how cold you get, and you'll be fine. You know, they will make it through a cold with protection. I would not leave them out in anything below 32 degrees without protection, but it is absolutely something you can do, and the faster you can get them in, the faster you can do that. And the reason why I want to do this video now is because you could be preparing these seeds, these potatoes or anything right now and getting them into the ground or getting them ready. You know, you could be starting seedlings, stuff like that, or you could be starting to get your potatoes pre-cut so they could start shitting. Another good one is lettuce. Lettuce is a really good one. It's just really the perfect time of year. You can get it in the ground, it can grow, it can be frost hardy, all that stuff. So again, you can harvest it at any time. You don't have to harvest the whole head. In the spring, we harvest the whole head at once. In the fall, we do cut and come again. And then we deploy our row covers, our low tunnels over it. And then we can get them lasting up until, I mean, I've had them last all the way through the winter, essentially, until probably about mid-February, when the only reason why I got rid of them is because I wanted to plant something else. So, you know, and that's on a lighter winter. You know, we do get a lot of freezing temperatures and we can be repeatedly in the teens, but on a winter where we basically don't get into the teens, that's when they will last through. But even into the low 20s with a row cover, they work great, you know. You know, we're imagining in this scenario that yes, there's gonna be strain on the system, I guess is the term you want to use. So with strain on the system, what can we do to relieve the pressure? Because in my viewpoint, and this may not be a popular viewpoint, but in my viewpoint, we, you included, are all self-sufficient to some degree. And while that helps protect you from other people, what it does is it helps those people who can't do what we want to do, what we do. And it allows them to get some of the supplies that they need as well. So it's kind of a win-win situation. Now, I like to look at it as the people who can't do it. The people who don't want to do it and refuse, that's on them. You know what I mean? That's all I got to say about that. But lettuce is a good one. You can direct sow it. You can, you know, anything. You can start it now, for instance, and get it in the ground. But that's really going to be, if you were going to direct sow it, that would be the end of the period in which I would say it's safe to direct sow. You still get plenty of sunlight and there's still plenty of warmth across the board unless you live somewhere extreme. So we are right here, we are mulched and ready to go, so nothing major there. This will just sit until we're ready to plant, and then we've still got to do this back half of this bed here. So we need to go through and we need to weed it. Thank you for giving me the ID for this weed right here. That is a Chambers Bittersweet. Double checked it, read about it, sucks, hate it, yep. So we're gonna get that out of there. We gotta mulch this one and then get the corn stalks out of here. This is basically weeded, and then mulch this one too and let it rest. And you know, keep going down the line here. You know, the reason why this is important too is because your garden is probably, if you're anything like me, your garden is meticulously planned out. And if you're not and you're striving for this, and this is just another tool for your toolbox, but things are coming out and going in at the times that I want them to. And something like this just really throws a huge hiccup in it and can really F with your head. You know what I mean? I was gonna say screw, but it just didn't have the right punch. So it messes with your head and it kind of throws you for a loop. So Another one that I would throw in the mix would be, I love growing rutabagas, but I would not put rutabagas in just because it's such a long season crop. I would go for the turnips. Very similar in taste, but you know, multi-use, all that good stuff, but it's very quick as well. And with turnips, I classify kohlrabi as the same, just being that the growing patterns are the same for them. The root is on top of the soil, but as far as germination time, temperature, size, really all of that, it's fairly similar. So, you know, with the turnips, you could just cast them out and then harvest the greens. You could space them out and get the roots. You can cast them out and get big greens and little roots, or whatever you want to do with them, and that makes them a really strong candidate for this. The last one I'll give you, and then I'll talk about what we did after that hurricane, is how to throw collard greens in the mix. And the reason why I throw collard greens in the mix is because I do believe they are one of the cold hardiest vegetables that I've ever grown. Routinely, year after year, they do fine in my garden as long as they are mature by the time they get a frost. They will go all the way through the winter, right into the next spring. So I bring you over here because they're gonna go in this bed more than likely. I keep going back and forth about it, but I think I do want to put them in this bed after all. And it's gonna be a huge staple. It keeps producing. They can get really big and you can get a lot of harvest off of them. And the fact that they don't, you know, you can just leave them in the garden is a huge deal. Again, if you throw a row cover on top of it, you can easily grow them throughout the winter in a lot of places. They are typically more famous in the South, but that is something that is definitely usable for this type of situation. So after that storm, it was like 6 years ago. It was a bad one. It sat on top of us for 3 or 4 days, I believe. And it gave us 40 inches of rain in that time. So, you know, everything was saturated. The tree fell, and we had to start over, and we salvaged what we could. So, you know, I think that year in particular, I think the only thing we were really able to keep was an eggplant and an okra plant. And that was it. But we had just harvested our sweet potatoes, so we had a full harvest of sweet potatoes that were good to go. But afterwards, we came in and we planted, and I did the huge no-no, and this was a combination of a few things. So one, I was very early into my journey as trying to figure out when to plant stuff appropriately. So I did the first thing that popped in my head, and I slapped some cabbages and broccoli in the ground. And wouldn't you know, it never really took off. I think the storm, by the time we could get stuff planted, it was around September 20th. Because, you know, it took a while before things would open up. We didn't have power. You know, it may have been even later than that. So, you know, we're thinking, you know, and I had to buy transplants at the time because I wasn't prepared in that manner for fall. I was, again, early into it. So we got our transplants in the ground. We'll just call it September 20th to 25th, somewhere in there. But they never really materialized, and they didn't really have a chance to grow. Now, there's a couple of reasons why. One, we only had about a month and a half until our first frost, which in itself is long enough. But the other thing is 40 inches of rain, what that ended up doing is it flushed all the nitrogen out of my garden. Every bit of it. So I never put nitrogen back in it that year. So essentially the key ingredient for growing leaves was not in my garden at the time. Now I know better. So I know if we get another huge storm, and we have in the past, we flush it with nitrogen right away and it keeps everything going. So we learned that the hard way, because nitrogen is water soluble, if you didn't know. It's the only of the big three that's really water soluble, means it will wash out of your garden. So we did that. We did do lettuces because that was our standard, and that did okay. But again, everything really stemmed from this point on back to the nitrogen. Now we did do radishes and they did great. They don't need a lot of nitrogen, right? So that was able to grow and get going. They were a little weak, but they made it. So we took that and we took that L as far as what we were able to grow into the winter. And then I analyzed it and I looked at it and I just made the changes as needed. Food, earlier and then all that. But I also, like I said, I made the wrong choice. I put in easily a 90-day, two 90-day crops that needed to be within a couple weeks of their finishing grow, in good conditions before the first frost, which I know that came out weird. Let me rephrase that. I put them in and there wasn't enough time for them to finish off after the first frost. So they can go through the first frost, but like broccoli, for instance, is really sensitive to frost. So if you don't cover it in a frost, and I wasn't prepared for covers at the time either, it'll burn the head. So, you know, you want to keep that under control. And we just, all the way around, it was just a big fail, and we knew it, and we just chalked it up and just kept going. So these are the things that we used in our garden, and we took away, and we're going to make it better for the future. So it doesn't matter, hurricane, storm, earthquake, fire, whatever, you know, it doesn't matter. These are the crops that I would focus on to get back in the garden quick. And I'm sure there's a plethora of others. You know, I focus on fast, hearty is really important, and then easily planted. Now we start seeds now, we've got seeds ready to go. But if we lost all of our garden, let's say this entire garden got damaged, the way we are planned out right now is not for a full 11 beds plus a greenhouse worth of planting. It's only for probably 8 beds. So we have 3 more beds that we can plant and a greenhouse. And there's so much you can put in those beds and fall. It's not like a tomato that takes up 4 square feet. It's not like a row of corn that you need to leave bare in the middle. I can put enough food in this one bed to live off of for a while. I don't know the exact number, depends on the crops, but you get my gist. But be safe out there, be prepared, be ready, and have a plan. Most importantly, you should have an evacuation plan, but I think you really need to have a planting plan.